Picture the walk home, the end of a long day, the light going gold over the fields, your boots on a dirt road you've walked 1,000 times, you're tired, your tools are heavy in your arms, and somewhere at the end of the road, someone is waiting for you. Henry Mays made that walk on an ordinary Wednesday in the spring of 1904, but Henry never made it home. The next morning, his own brother-in-law found him lying in the middle of the road, 3 miles outside Iron Mountain, Missouri, with 10 pieces of buckshot in his body and a plow blade still clutched in his arms. He was 22 years old. He had been married 5 months, and the man who killed him was never named. Not that week, not that year, not in the 120 years since. One thing before we go any further. Everything I'm about to tell you as fact comes from a single surviving source, the county newspaper that reported Henry's death in 1904. The moment we step past what that record can prove, into motive, into suspects, into why, I'm going to tell you plainly that we've crossed into speculation. This is a real case, an unsolved one, and nothing here is an accusation against any real person, living or dead. The gaps are part of the story. In a way, the gaps are the story. So let's start with the world that swallowed him. In 1904, this little corner of southeast Missouri was one of the most valuable patches of ground on the planet. They called it the Old Lead Belt. Under these hills sat the richest lead deposits anyone had ever found. And a single company, the St. Joe Lead Company, was pulling a fortune out of the dark. Whole towns existed only because of the mine. Bonne Terre, Flat River, Leadwood, Deloge. Company houses, company stores, company water. And where the money was, the men came. Thousands of them. Miners, farmers, immigrants off the boat with a contract and a dream, packed into rough camps and rougher saloons. Here's what that kind of boom doesn't put on a postcard. It was violent. The same newspapers that covered Henry's death also ran a story about a boarding house keeper accused of poisoning his tenant's coffee. A man shot dead walking home from the circus with a girl. A few years later, a mob would load over 1,000 immigrant workers into rail cars at gunpoint and ship them out of the county. This was a place where life was cheap. And in a place where life is cheap, one dead farmer barely slows down the next shift. That's the first thing you have to understand. Henry Mays wasn't famous. He was ordinary, which is exactly why he was so easy to forget. Now look at the body in the road, because the details, the physical details, straight from the coroner's record, are where this stops being a statistic and starts being a horror. 10 buckshot. Not one, not a warning, 10. 4 of them entered just above the heart, more clustered near the right side of his chest, 1 in the arm. And here's the detail that has stayed with me. He still had the plow blade in his arms. Think about what that means. He didn't drop his tools to run. He didn't raise his hands to fight. Whatever happened on that road happened so fast or so close that a strong young man never even let go of the iron he was carrying. This wasn't a brawl that got out of hand. This wasn't a robbery where somebody panicked. The record gives no sign he was robbed at all. This looks, for all the world, like an execution. On a road he knew by heart, 3 miles from his own front door. So who investigates a thing like that in rural Missouri in 1904? The honest answer is barely anyone. When Henry's body was found, the authorities tried to reach the county coroner, a man named Evans, over in Bonne Terre. They couldn't get to him, so the job fell to a local squire, William H. Young, who came out to the road and convened an inquest right there over the body. And the verdict that inquest returned is the coldest sentence in this whole story. Henry Mays, it said, came to his death by gunshot wounds, inflicted by a gun in the hands of some unknown person. Some unknown person. Read it again slowly because that's it. That is the entire legal conclusion of a young man's murder. No suspect, no name. 6 words, and the file closes. And here's the part that makes it worse. The paper goes out of its way to tell you Henry had no enemies. He was, in their words, a peaceable young farmer, a good, hard-working man, generally liked by his neighbors. Nobody knew of any trouble he'd had with anyone. In true crime, that is the hardest wall there is, because a killing usually points somewhere, to a debt, to a grudge, to a jealous man. Henry's points nowhere. The motive isn't hidden. As far as the record knows, it simply doesn't exist. So let's do the thing the inquest couldn't. Let's ask, who does this? And let me be clear, everything from here is speculation. This is us wondering where the record went silent. Maybe it was a mistake. A dark road, a shotgun, the wrong man in the wrong coat. Maybe it was a robbery that went wrong before it went anywhere, though nothing was reported taken. Or maybe it was the oldest reason there is, a private grievance in a small county that everyone agreed never to say out loud. In a company town where your boss owned your house and your debt and your church pew, there were a lot of reasons a man might keep his mouth shut. But notice what every one of those theories has in common. They all only work because of when and where this happened. 1904, no fingerprints, no forensics, no photographs of the scene. A coroner who couldn't even be reached, and an inquest held by a squire on a dirt road. To get away with murder here, you didn't need to be clever, you just needed to be quiet. The system did the rest. And that should bother you more than the buckshot. Because we like to believe that time sorts things out, that the past is settled, that somewhere eventually the guilty are written down and the innocent are avenged. Henry Mays is proof that it doesn't work that way. History doesn't hand out justice. Most of the time, it just hands out silence. And we mistake that silence for peace. Somewhere out in those hills, a man walked away from that road. And there's a real chance he lived a long, full life right on top of what he'd done. Raised a family, sat in church, died of old age in a warm bed with a name, which is one more thing he had that Henry doesn't. So let's go back to the road. The light going gold, the walk home, the tools in his arms, and the person waiting at the other end of it. A wife, married 5 months, who set a table that night for a man who was already lying in the dark. The newspaper gave her one line of comfort. It said she had the sympathy of all. It never gave her the one thing she actually needed, a name. Henry Mays was 3 miles from home, and in 120 years, no one has ever closed the distance.